All right, everyone. So let's talk about some 15th century European dysfunction, specifically Italian European dysfunction, going all the way back to the 1400s in the Renaissance period. Uh, these last couple of days, I've been talking about some crazy Orthodox people and some dysfunctional behavior within the Orthodox Church, specifically defending a guy who raped children and murdered a little girl. Yes, I'm talking about Frank Atwood. But today I want to talk about some old European dysfunction, old world dysfunction. So I was reading about the Medici family, very powerful banking family in the Renaissance period. And Lorenzo de' Medici, he was quite close with the Vatican. Together, they were making profits from the sales of alum, which was a very important chemical compound at the time for fixing dyes onto clothes. But they weren't exactly friends. They were business partners, right? It was an alliance that was purely for money. They weren't really friends, and one day, Pope Sextus IV decides that he wants to get a loan of 40,000 florins so that he can buy the government office for an area called Imola in Italy, of course. And he wanted to buy this government office for one of his nephews, who was suspected to actually be his son, because, the popes in those days weren't exactly living a life of chastity. Anyway, Lorenzo de' Medici, being the leader of this very powerful banking empire that he inherited from his father, didn't really trust the Pope because he suspected that the reason why the Pope wanted to buy out this government office was so that the Vatican could control the trade routes in that area called Imola. So he refused to give the Pope the loan. The Pope was absolutely furious. Not only did he refuse to give the Pope the loan, but he also told all of the other banks in Florence to also refuse to give the Pope a loan. All the Florentine bankers, he told them, don't give the Pope a loan. But there was one very powerful banking family at the time. This was the Pazzi family, and this was the biggest rival of the Medici banking empire. And the Pazzi bank told the Pope, yeah, we'll give you a loan. Here you go, 40,000 florins. Go buy that government office for your nephew, whatever. And this angered Lorenzo de' Medici because Lorenzo de' Medici wanted power. He didn't like people going against his own desires. And this was just mafia. I mean, that's what this was. We hear about The Godfather and, oh yeah, Chicago mafia, but this is very old. The mafia is ancient. And you go back to the 15th century and before that, you'll read about these Italian families that were fighting each other, the Orsini family, the Pazzi family, the Medici family, whatever. They were all these families. It was just old world mafia. That's all this was. And there was a very wealthy man in the Pazzi family who died, and Lorenzo de' Medici, ordered that his inheritance be given to his wife, and the wife of this wealthy Pazzi man who passed away. And the reason why Lorenzo de' Medici wanted this was because the woman who married this old rich guy who died was not of the Pazzi family, and so Medici wanted to shift this inheritance away from the Pazzi family. And of course, the Pazzi family was absolutely pissed about this. I would be too. It's like, that's like the government imposing a huge inheritance tax on you. I'd be pissed. So the Pazzi family decided that they were going to orchestrate a very violent revolution against the Medici-controlled government in Florence. And so they organized a conspiracy in cahoots with the Pope. So the Pope wanted to overthrow Medici, and the Pazzi family also wanted to overthrow Medici. And so one day, and this is a crazy, crazy-ass story, one day, Lorenzo de' Medici is in church. He's going to Mass. He's in Mass. He's right next to the altar, and there are two priests standing beside the altar. And you think, they're priests. They're harmless, right? They would never do anything violent. But all of a sudden, these two priests pull out knives and they start to attempt to stab Lorenzo de' Medici to death. And one of them managed to stab Mr. Medici in the neck. Lorenzo de' Medici managed to run away, but his brother, different Italian, Giuliano, was stabbed to death, and he didn't make it. Meanwhile, the Archbishop of Pisa was trying to orchestrate a revolution in order to take some big government building in Florence that was owned by the Medici family. In those days, just like today, there were many people who loved the Medici family. It wasn't like the Medici family was just this big, powerful, wealthy family that everybody hated because they were rich and they lived luxurious lifestyles or whatever. They were a lot of regular folks who love the Medici family, just like there are people today in America who love the Trump family, even though they're filthy rich. You have people who, and I'm not saying we should hate people because they're rich, but you have people who hate wealthy families, and I don't like that. I don't like the idea of hating a family because they're wealthy. It's like they made their wealth, people inherited that wealth within the family. It's none of your business. But in those days, there were people who hated the Medici family, but there were also a lot of regular folks who loved the Medici family. And a mob formed, and they noticed what this archbishop was trying to do. They went up to the building where he was, and they threw him out the window with a rope around his neck. And as he was kicking his feet, breathing out his last breath, the crowd on the ground were looking up to him, cheering as they were watching him die. Then they found one of the priests that tried to stab Lorenzo de' Medici to death. They cut his private parts off, and they hung him. They lynched him. And in the midst of all this chaos, Mr. Lorenzo de' Medici pops his head out the window of his big building. I think it was called the Palazzo de' Medici. And he tells the people that he will not let foreigners ruin him, and he will defend the city of Florence, and he will protect the people. And the people just went ecstatic. They absolutely loved it. They loved him. And so Lorenzo de' Medici, he took advantage of the fame that he got from surviving a coup, right? This was a coup. This was a coup that was orchestrated by the Pazzi family and by Pope Sextus IV, by the Vatican. And Lorenzo de' Medici survived it. And Medici came out as a conquering hero. And so he made a pact with the ruler of Naples, and he made this pact as a security alliance, just like governments do today. And he also embezzled the government's treasury in order to throw very lavish. I think it was like for lavish festivals. He went to Naples, and he had all of these very fancy displays of pomp and all this stuff. Cost a lot of money, and he also gave money to the slaves that were working in the ship, and he did all these things as a way to appear as a righteous ruler. And, he had to spend a lot of money, and that money he embezzled from the treasury. And he eventually changed the constitution of Florence in order to give himself more power. So he was basically Erdogan circa 15th century. Very interesting history, I must say. It was like the mafia, but when you read this history and you have to say, ain't nothing changed. Anyway, you guys just heard some theology. God bless.